love some kindness today. Engage in acts of loving kindness. We're not going to talk about chesed anymore. No, we're in section 17 today. And today we're going to discuss how great the idea of charity is. So we've spent a long time talking about all the types of chesed, extending loans. Now we're going to talk about charity. Okay, so what is tzedakah? So the rabbis say, Ahavas Chaim says, the following is learned in a baraisa. In three ways, chesed, gemilos chasadim, is greater than tzedakah, is greater than charity. Why? Because tzedakah is done through money, whereas chesed can be done whether through your money or through your own person. Okay, so with your money, Ahavas Chaim says, I'll lend you some money. I'll lend you some utensils. I'll lend you an animal, right? I've jokingly said, if you have a rodent problem, I'll lend you a cat. When else would you lend an animal nowadays, right? I'll lend you a goat. Need some milk? Lend you a cow, right? That's what it would mean. It's something with I have to give you a physical object. However, what are types of chesed? Giving a nice eulogy for a departed person, help somebody get married, help somebody get buried, okay? Extending joy to a bride or a groom, okay? And accompanying your friend on the way so they don't feel lonely. These are all things. Now that explanation doesn't actually come from the Ahavas Chaim. He's quoting Rashi, but that's the explanation. Tzedakah for poor people. Chesed, as we explained previously, doesn't matter. Tzedakah is only done for the living. Chesed, you could be dead, right? The chesed is about the bigger picture. That's what I talk about how amazing the chesed is. Now, having said all that, amazing chesed doesn't mean you have to ignore tzedakah. Okay, you can't ignore it, and in some ways it's better than chesed. Okay, tzedakah is a permanent contribution that you make, whereas chesed is fleeting. Sometimes I do it just temporarily, but tzedakah, it's something that's a regular, consistent need. Okay? Especially if I'm giving you a loan and it has to come back, that's not tzedakah, that's chesed. Okay? So you need even more strength over your inclinations when it comes to doing tzedakah. Unlike chesed. And as we said previously, I love to quote the statement in Perkei Lafum Tzara Aga. It's equivalent reward to whatever you put into it. So when the Gemara says that it's better to give a loan to a poor person than to just simply give them the money outright, it means that when it really impacts you, right? You know, it's really impactful. So, you know, it also depends on the type of loan that you're doing. So in some ways, making sure that they have a loan is better than a gift because they won't feel as humiliated by it. So there's a little bit of chesed in that tzedakah, okay? Or a little bit of tzedakah in that chesed. But, you know, somebody who is destitute, you just got to give them the money. Let them get the money and get this back on their feet, okay? And it says that when the Torah says that before, right, you have a choice today. Moshe Rabbeinu standing at the foot of the mountain and we're about to enter the land of Israel. You must choose life. You either choose life and good or death and destruction. Why are those two things at an opposite end? I gave you both of them. I gave you both the good and I gave you the bad. Okay? So you have these two paths to choose. One path is a path of charity, and the other path is a path of chesed. And Eliyahu, a Navi, used to walk down the middle of them because he would do the following. The story is recorded in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. He says when he would see a person approaching, he would announce, "Open the gates and allow the person to enter to the trustworthy nation, this righteous nation." Also, we find by Shmuel Hanavi, Shmuel the prophet himself, who was a judge in Israel, who lived before Eliyahu Navi, and he would say, how should I go? Should I do the chesed walk today, or should I do the tzedakah walk today? Okay? So which one should I do? One might be better than the other one today. Which one should I be? So Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, here is testimony that is being witnessed by heaven and earth. I'm not leaving you these two paths. I'm taking them. Okay? And Hashem says, Shmuel, what you need to do, and he's referring to Moshe Rabbeinu in this case, says, you are standing between two good choices. So I'm going to give you three good gifts. Okay? And they are the following. Okay? That you should learn that everyone who does charity and good deeds, they will also get three things. They're going to get chayim, tzedakah, and kavod. They're going to get life, charity, and honor. Because that's exactly what it said. Rodev, tzedakah, v'chesed, yimsa chayim, tzedakah, v'chavod. So someone who looks for these things, you can get those things in return. But the opposite of chesed seems to be kavod. Okay? So therefore, when you make these choices, you're going to get these different things. So why does Hashem leave out good and bad? You need to have two choices, but you're left with making the bad things into good things. And when you take the bad things and make them good, such as giving tzedakah and doing chesed, that's when you see that really the two choices are doing good and doing better. So, right, basically what you send around comes around. Yeah, people talk about paying it forward, also these concepts have been around in Jewish literature for thousands of years. One of my favorite rebukes of all time is Nachmanides, is the Disputation of Barcelona. Nachmanides looks at the king of Aragon and he says to him, you asked me to come out here and do the disputation to prove that the Messiah has come. He says, look at your world around you. Does this world feel redeemed? Are people doing all the charity and all the goodness? He says, I see wars, I see destruction, I see famine. If the Messiah has come, these things would improve. It's the greatest rebuke. Is society better off? Well, in the aggregate, in many ways, yes. In many ways, yes. A lot of the things that encountered the ancient world, because you had those choices before you. When you wish to take on the burden of Torah, especially in the supersession way that Christianity tried to do, they forgot this important point that you have choices. You can live and be well, or be destructive and be bad. And if you don't take those two things and make them both good, you eliminate the good choices from people. And there's always this option to do bad that you need to remove it. Okay, so what are the things that distract from tzedakah? So it says in Pirkei Avos that everything is based on what you do. Okay, that's in the 3rd chapter, it's the 15th Mishnah. Okay, however much you do. So the Rambam says on that, he says that the different levels that a person attains is not by how much he does, but it's how many times he does it. So it's about improving the number of good deeds that you are doing. So one giant deed is not as good as multiple opportunities. Okay? Because you're not really changing much of your life, you're making one little thing. So he gives an example. He says, if I see one person, I give him $1,000, right? And then the one guy, I give him nothing. So, I've really only done one good deed. One huge, big, life-changing thing to one person. The other person, forget him. Okay? Now, how much more of a difference would it make if I give $1,000 to 1,000 people 1,000 times? Well, that's clearly much better, and you're doing more and more opportunities for that. But the point is that the idea of the giving and the commitment to giving is 1,000 different commitments to giving. That's the whole point, and that is how you make a change in yourself. That is the midah you want to do, and that's how you're going to increase your likelihood of opportunities of doing good things. And so and this is actually the Sefer Chinuch echoes this the same concept that the person's his netios, his drives go with whatever it is he's focusing on doing. So when you focus on doing selfish things all the time, you're going to always look for selfish things and try to explain the world in a selfish way. And the opposite, you'll do more charitable things. Okay, so if you give to a poor person, one of the things you can do is you can redeem them if they're captured. Okay, you can also give somebody when they need what's called day machsoro, their minimum daily needs. Okay, and that might be much more common than the person who's being redeemed from captivity. And maybe sometimes it's giving some of the needs to a bunch of poor people. And so you give each one of them something from that, you've done more and more good deeds. So that seems to be the point. That's why the Torah lists so many types of deeds that you can do. That each one of them is done with different amounts of money, and you can accomplish so many different things. Otherwise, what someone just said, give money, and it would be a one-time thing. And so therefore, it's based on the account of the quantity of activities you've done. And so therefore, each time you do it, it counts for one opportunity being done, and not more than that, no matter how much you give. And so therefore, we're looking for multiple opportunities to do tzedakah. Okay, and each one of those is their own separate mitzvah. Okay? So, originally what it used to be, when people would give out just a little bit each time, you would get a little good deed for each one of those little things you would give out. Now, when you look at a full year, all these little bits you give out, you'll see there's actually a lot there. Okay, and so that's why you should see that it's important to do it lots and lots of times. So again, $1,000 one time, still not equal to giving $2 every day for a whole year, or whatever it would be to get to the same amount of money. Another thing that's important to know about that could lead a person to not do tzedakah properly is that the number of demands within one's community could reduce the amount of tzedakah that's being given. Because when a poor person goes on their own, sometimes someone who has money will give, sometimes they won't. Sometimes they'll feel like it, sometimes they won't feel like it. They'll give you a little more, they'll give you a little less. Sometimes they'll avoid you. Sometimes maybe they'll be like, I don't have any money, let me give you some clothing, right? Sometimes they'll give it to them directly. Sometimes you'll get it from their children or their spouse. But that's if you do it haphazard. But if you know how every time when someone comes to see you that you give them, then you'll know to do a certain amount each time, whether it's a third of it or a quarter of it. Okay, and so there's no person who gets poor from giving tzedakah. Because we say that a person who gives out their money, that he's only going to increase more money. Okay, so therefore a person should always look to spread tzedakah like one would plant a field. You want it to continue. You plant it in multiple places and it grows back. So if one pursues tzedakah, much like Chesed we said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, will give him more money to do more tzedakah. Okay, now number 3. The person who conducts themselves as if giving tzedakah somehow ruins the ability of the sort of middle class people in their standing, because they're busy taking care of these poor people, whereas the rich people who live so far away, they don't have to see all the poverty. Okay, so they go like a poor person who's rather destitute, doesn't have his own place. He goes to a home, and they give him a little piece of bread to eat, whatever they can afford to, and that is tzedakah, and they do it every day. Now, if you go ahead and you set up some type of place where they don't have to constantly go door to door, the poor, but you have a mosdos, or you have an institution that handles their poverty, so you are going to reduce the amount of tzedakah being done throughout the city, that that you shouldn't actually do that. So it's only if you're not meeting the amounts. There are people not around to give the tzedakah that you should be doing that, but not in order to keep them from doing the mitzvah of tzedakah. That's really bad. The fourth case over here, he says that there was a case with the Gemara of Mar Ukva. He said it's better to give food to the poor than to give them money. Why? Because there's more benefit in food than there is in money for the poor. But if you give them money, then they have to go buy the food. And so basically he was saying that you should just give them food. But if you say not to give them food, and then you don't give them food, and you don't give them money, it's terrible. So that defeats the purpose of it. Okay? And so you shouldn't try to say that they have to only give that. If just saying that it would be easier for them, to not have to take money if taking food is something normally you would give. Here, have a loaf of bread, have a cake, I made a casserole, have it. So, nonetheless, a person shouldn't look to replace the giving of money with the giving of food, but look to sustain one with the other. It's actually when Ashkenazi Jews made the first aliyah to Israel in the late 19th century, early 20th century, the first Ashkenazi institutions were soup kitchens, because the people coming there they were coming from Europe poor, and they were looking more poor when they got to Israel. They had to look to a lot of the Sephardim in some instances that for help, and the Sephardim were kind of like, we'll help you out a little bit. So, but the original soup kitchens and poor institutions started in Jerusalem back in the day, were Ashkenazi institutions. Interesting. Okay. Now, another important problem is locking the door before the poor. So a person should always the mission. It says in the mission for Ahavas, open your doors and let the poor be part of your household. So that's explained in Ahavas Rabbi Nassan, the explanations of Ahavas according to Rabbi Nassan from Babylonia, that you should really leave it open on all four sides, just like we describe Abraham's house being open that way. And so that way they should all come in from all their appropriate sides. And in fact, Abraham did that, and Eov did that. So even though we can't do that nowadays, our houses were built differently than their houses were, the idea is that you should be available, but definitely shouldn't be closing the door before the poor. Okay? Although I did see recently there was an unfortunate case. A case in Reno, Nevada, an Israeli person who tried to help a homeless man. Didn't work out well. You can look up that case. It's unfortunate, but it's not much. It's good. So you know who the people are, and they're good people, good yid, and you can open the door for them. Let them in. You don't have to put your life at risk for such a thing. And so, therefore, a person should always look to help out the poor in these situations. And it says, for example, that Rav Huna, that when he would break bread, he would open the door and he would say, "Kol man ditzrich leisei v'leichol." The same thing he would say at every meal. Same thing he would say every single Pesach. All who are hungry, let them come and eat. It comes from this case. Okay? And they talk about the greatness of feeding guests, because this is something that destroyed a couple of families in Israel, which Rashi explains was Ammon and Moab. They were pushed away from being part of the children of Israel because they didn't come to meet the children of Israel out in the desert with food and drink. So Hashem said, you can't accept them as converts into the community. They have no business being part of the community of Hashem for not bringing in food and water. Okay? And so for 40 years, it says in the Midrash that they could have had 40 years, they could have gone to them, they knew where they were, and they could have brought them something. Okay? And they knew the man was coming, and they knew that the water was coming from the thing, but nonetheless, there's still a sense that they could have gone ahead and made some effort to go there. Okay? So even if you know somebody has all of these things available to them, and here they are traveling, the mitzvah to have them come and be nisarich by you, to come and be a guest by you, would be a tremendous example of good tzedakah. And actually, something they started in my community, and a lot of the communities, is they've more centrally organized the requests for chesed and centralized it. Not always a good thing, you know. Sometimes they have like sillier things, like you know, you need a referral from your rabbi, like the local rabbis gonna know who they are. I mean, if you don't know, if somebody's coming from out of town, you don't know who they are, you know. So, you know, don't give them a place to stay necessarily. The local rub or whatever. But you know, use a little intelligence for them. I'm saying that because the local rabbi, their job is not to say whether no person is safe. Like you can say this person, you know, they don't know how to live at home. They don't know what it's like to have them in their house. You know, you should ask them for a reference to somebody at whose house they have stayed, and find out from the rabbi if those people all attend their shul. But that's what I'm saying is like that's like the important thing to do. Other things that are bad to do is raising a bad dog in your house. Why? Because they're always keeping people from coming to your house, right? You have to raise a nice dog, and there's good ways to raise nice dogs. Okay, lots of ways to raise nice dogs. If you're not sure how to do that, just input how to raise a nice dog. You can look up Zach George, Caesar Milan. Let them argue back and forth how to raise a nice dog, right? Don't keep people out of your house. Raise a nice dog. Number 6. So people should always be very charitable and very empathetic to others, right? They should be. We ask Hashem chamol al ma'asecha, that you should be kind and recognize that the plight of your people. We should also do that all the time, because that's the most important thing. That's what's going to accustom you to wanting to do chesed like this. Okay, because many people don't even experience what poverty looks like. Okay, you know, you want to experience poverty? Take a little ride down to downtown Baltimore. Drive around over there. You'll see plenty of it. Take a drive into some of these neighborhoods in New York City. The plight is real. It's a real deal. It's a real deal, especially in the cities. You may not see it so much when you're out in out and about, because people live simply. But you want to see real poverty? Look in the cities. You can see the boarded up houses. They don't have people have racing dresses. It's terrible. Okay, number 7 over here. That when the rabbis of Talmud said that if someone approaches a poor person to come to them nicely, that you get 11 blessings. Okay, and this Gemara is on Bava Basra, page 9b. Okay. Now, number 8, and on everything. On all this, avera gerer severe says a couple of times. Doing bad just brings more bad. Because what's going to happen is you're going to say bad things about the poor people, and then you're going to say keep the poor people away. All right, and who's going to know how bad this sin is going to be when you lock away the poor people? Okay, and it says. It says here in Devarim, he quotes, he says, Devarim, this is Deuteronomy 15:9, Penya Devar in Levavcha Bilal Lamor, right? There might be something evil in your heart, like we say about the Shemitah loans. You don't want to give loans, right? Right? And you will be bitter in your eyes. You will embitter your eyes. You will look evil upon these people. You give them an evil eye, right? Ra einecha, ayin hara, literally comes from the Torah. These words, ra einecha, you will place an evil eye upon your brethren, the impoverished one, and give them nothing. And how much so more so if you cause them to be, if you use police action or such things. I had a friend call me up today. He said, "What do I do with this guy? This homeless guy showed up in front of my house." I said, you can talk to the police. Sometimes I'll give him a ride to the shelter. He said, they won't shoot him. I said, well, they're not going to shoot him. I said, I've had this problem before. I've called the police. I asked them if they can identify the guy, especially if he's trespassing, right? And they often can direct them back to the shelters. He said the police, for whatever reason, that day were too busy to help him with that. This depends on good phone. Maybe I have the right kind of voice on the phone. Hi, it's Rabbi Walls. I'm calling about some guy passed out. And they're like, "Oh, Rabbi will come right out to." Maybe it's just a difference. This is different. So it's just somebody else's community versus if your first name's Rabbi. So when you want to call for help, sometimes say your first name's Rabbi. Don't do that. So if you're going to have all these people who are going to be left unattended to, such as the widowed and the orphan, and you should be very careful about their crying out, because the Torah itself says that is the thing that God listens to the most. And in fact, the Rambam says in Hilchos Deis, I love this statement of the Rambam. He says, it's in chapter 6, halacha 10. A person is obligated to pay specific attention to the women bereft of husbands and the children bereft of parents. And how you're supposed to conduct yourself with them. You should not speak to them in any way other than gently. And you should only be honorable to them. And you should be kind to them. And you should make sure that you don't oppress them at all, not even the slightest bit. And you should be even more careful with whatever money they have, more than the money of anybody else. And all those who fight with them and pick fights with them or anger them or cause them trouble, or especially if you make them work too hard, or you cause them to lose their money or take advantage of them, there is a Torah prohibition that you have violated. And so much the more so if you have struck them or cursed them, that the Torah is even that much more virulent in its language about how bad you are behaving. Now, you don't get lashes for such as punishment, the Rambam says, but the Torah says, here is the punishment you get. Right? And the God says, and God says to you, I will be angry with you, God says, and I will smite you with a sword. Now, that's people think about getting struck by lightning, whatever. God will take a sword and strike you for going ahead and causing this pain and suffering to the widows and the orphans. Take a look there, he says. Okay, and it says even further in other places too that you shouldn't oppress the widow and the orphan. This is the Rabbeinu Yonah brings this down in Shari Tshuva, which is in his third gate, which is statement number 24. It's even saying nasty things to them, cause them any pain. He says, it amazes me that people will cause problems to those who don't have a parent, or who don't have the husband, and they don't fear for themselves at all that there'll be any kind of repercussions for being nasty to them. It's not as if the Torah hasn't warned them, just like it says in the Rambam. And even more if they're poor, or if they're already depressed, or suffering melancholy, and it's difficult and terrible for them as it is. Those who do these things to them should be afraid of what the repercussions will be that come as a result of this. Because Hashem does not turn his ear away from the cry of the poor or the impoverished. He would never let them call out and not be answered. Okay? And so therefore, he says to Rabbeinu Yonah that you should always be worried that someone's going to come and save them, and that person who saves them is the Melech Malachei HaMalakim, that the Holy One, blessed be He, the King of Kings. He is one who will bring the army to save them. So the Ahavas Chaim wraps it up over here. One second. So he's wrapping it up over here by saying that it's really important that people really focus on all of these things, because the greatness of tzedakah is that it also increases your life in the days and the length of your days, and how much it brings life to you, and it only does more than good things to you. And when that does that, it also brings not only life in this world, also the next world as well. And he brings a number of sources here, quoting tons and tons of psukim that talk about the term ashrei and tzedakah used together. Ashrei is be praised, right? And it's talking about tzedakah right there. And so therefore, since the praise and tzedakah are juxtaposed to each other, we see how much Hashem values all of these things. Okay, and he quotes one more statement over here. Now we'll finish up with this over here. He quotes Ahavas Chessed one last time. He said, there was once a story of a certain righteous person who used to give lots of tzedakah. He one time went on a boat. The wind blew and sank the boat. Rabbi Akiva saw, and he went in front of the Beis Din to testify about the death of this wealthy person in order to permit his wife to remarry. And they hadn't finished giving the final order from the court yet. That certain person walked in the court and stood there right next to him, and they said, "Aren't you the guy who just died in the water?" He said, "That's me. I'm the guy who died." So they ask him, the court asks him, who took you out of the sea? He says, the tzedakah that I did, it took me out of the water. They said, well, okay, how do you know the tzedakah saved you, right? Was it tzedakah man? Who saved you? He says, I went to the deepest depths of the water. And he said, I heard a great cry come out from the waves of the sea. And each one was saying to the other one, quickly raise this man back to the top, because he does tzedakah all the days of his life. At that very moment, Rabbi Kiva stood up and he says, blessed is the creator of the world, the God of Israel. He has chosen, in the words of his Torah and the words of the brilliant sages who teach the Torah, and those words will last for now and forever. For it says in Koheles, this is 11:1, Shlach lach mecha al pei hamayim ki berov hayimim tim tzo'ehu. He says, throw out your bread upon the water, because in many days you will find it. In many days you will find it. What does that mean? Right? Tzedakah tatzil mimapes. Tzedakah saves you from death. And so in honor of the tzedakah this man did, he was able to go back and increase his tzedakah that he was doing even more so. And so therefore, you see the blessing that's brought in. So always know, by the way, it never hurts to learn how to swim. The rabbis say you got to teach people how to swim. Giving tzedakah is not an excuse not to learn how to swim. Mitzvah to learn how to swim. Mitzvah to teach your children how to swim. But you see over here in a case where he absolutely needed it the most, and he needed to be saved, even the heavens and the earth came to his defense to say, this is not how this story ends for this man. This is just the beginning and the middle of his story. He needs to continue doing tzedakah. And with that, we will pause for today. This class will take a break for Shavuos and resume within 2 weeks after that, where we will talk about Meiser Ksafim, which is an interesting topic about how to tithe the money that you earn. Is it from your gross? Is it from your net? Is it from something else? How do you calculate this thing that we refer to as tithing your money? Everyone have a wonderful Yom Tov, and we will see you soon.